Welcome back to Bonded by Metal with Andrew McKay Smith from Scars and Guitars podcast and yours truly from BaldHeaded Metal. Today we want to discuss, we're usually very positive on this channel, but today we're going to discuss disappointments in bands where we typically love these bands, but just release an album we absolutely fucking hate. And if you don't mind, Andrew, I'm going to start this one off because this one I'm going to be passionate about.
Oh, go ahead.
Now, I'm going to start with one of my favorite bands of all time is Slayer. And yes, Slayer after, was it South of Heaven, kind of started going on a downfall. But Diabolus and Musica, Divine Intervention, even God Hates Us All, there were still decent albums. And there was Christ's Delusion. They had some songs to dive into. World Painted Blood in 2009 was absolute horseshit. It was not one song. I didn't even like one riff on that album, not to mention the production. And then to my surprise, that it actually got decent ratings among critics and had decent critical success. I thought that album is literally, once I heard a couple songs, I'm like, Slayer needs to retire. Thankfully, they proved me wrong with Repentless, which had a couple of good songs, especially I think Gary Holt helped on that album a little bit. But holy crap, I could not believe I can have a band that I love so much with an album that I hate so much at the same time.
It was tempting to put Slayer in the mix, but I've got to say, at least they remained heavy. I get what you're saying, and you're right.
Yeah.
The riffs weren't there. The biggest issue that Slayer faced was and look, we've got to talk about this because it's what happened as Jeff Hanneman's alcoholism progressed, he checked out.
Yeah.
And you can hear that with their records. Okay, that's just what happened. He was left to write Diabolus and Musica by himself. By that stage, Kerry had completely checked out. Look, Diabolus and Musica has some fine points. There's no doubt about it, particularly in context to the era it was released. 1998 is hardly heavy metal's high watermark, okay?
Yeah.
But it's still a heavy, brutal bastard of an album, no matter which way you want to spin it. The issue basically came down to quality control, I believe. The band ran out of really interesting ideas. By seasons, they were just really done. Did they have some worthy material after that? Absolutely. But were they still the well-rounded, brutal killing machine that they had been for 4 or 5 albums all the way through up to seasons? Of course not. Okay. And, it sort of underlines the theory that most bands only have that sort of 3, 4 or 5 albums in them before it just becomes a job. And we as fans just sort of hang and wait with bated breath on a new release being the savior, if you like, and it just never came with Slayer. So, no, I agree with you. And but they're still a legendary band, and it is what it is.
Of course. And you know what it is? The stagnation of Slayer never bothered me. If they gave me more of the same, I would have been happy, to be honest. Repentless is a perfect example. It's more of the same. It's nothing new, but it's just, there was nothing for me to grab onto. And that just hit my soul because I'm a thrash head through and through, man.
Well, they are the thrash metal fans, thrash metal band. They're the only band that hasn't let us down. Let's face it. They really haven't. And what happened with Jeff was tragic. Really, you would just wish he'd gotten the help that he needed at the time, but he clearly didn't want it. A bit like Joey from Slipknot. They had their issues and their demons, and the demons got the better of them, unfortunately. But the music is still there, and you look. And the other thing, I mean, how many times can we listen to Rain in Blood? All the time is my point. It's just the album that keeps.
I will disagree there. I can listen to it every single year, every single month, almost every single day, sir.
No, that's my point. No, it's the album that keeps on giving. It's great gym music. It's if you're feeling down, it'll lift you up. If you're feeling like you're feeling a bit angry, it'll sort of bring you down a little bit. You can express your anger through it. So look, it's that and Rust in Peace. They're the two, the undisputable heavyweight champions of thrash metal right there.
Yes, agreed.
All right. And on that note, I just mentioned Megadeth, and how can I go past the absolute worst album ever released by a band of any note?
Oh, no, man. I know where you're going with this. Come on, yep.
Risk. I was there. Let me just say, I was there as a fan. I've been a fan for years, almost a decade up to that point, from a young kid right the way through to I might have been 20 or 21, I think, at the time when that album was was released, and this is before the internet had really sort of, got its hooks into everybody. It was still there. Megadeth were one of the first bands to have a web page, so I used to go onto their web page and check things out, and they'd release tidbits. And one of the first things that came to, one of the first obvious or most ominous things, I should say, that that presented itself was that the band wasn't releasing music; it was releasing what I thought was soundscapes on the internet, just music playing in the background. Those bloody players.
Yeah. I
that they used
remember
to have
that.
back in the day. Horrible. They used to slow down your machine and everything. We're using just very slow broadband or dial-up back then, and there were these soundscapes. And I remember thinking, "What are you doing, Dave? This just sounds like soundtrack music or something." And then the album was released. Of course, I dutifully went out and bought it and thought, "What the hell is this shit?" Okay. Now, the album's been out for 23 years or whatever it is now, but it has no, I don't think, hey, feel free to disagree with me here, of course, but it's an album with almost no redeeming qualities whatsoever on any level. It has just no redeeming features.
There, I would disagree with you. I think if he released it as a side project with not the Megadeth name on it, I would think of some people who are into rock would enjoy it. It was probably not his best work either way, but I think there's enjoyable things, almost like Load Reload, with a different skin over a different band over a different name. It could be good music. It just doesn't fit within the realm of what Megadeth, or in that case, Metallica is. And I would say Cryptic Writings had good songs. It just Risk went into that thrash and roll that he calls way too far. And I agree with you. It's notoriously the worst Megadeth album. So much so I never heard, in all the times I've seen them live, ever play a song from Risk.
No, never, not once.
No.
They played the intro to Enter the Arena, I think it was, at the gig that I went to in 2001, as the music that came on over the loudspeaker or what have you as I was walking on stage. I think they did that then. That was the closest that I've heard. But look, for anybody out there, name a single memorable tune from that album. I mean, put it on and listen to it. It is absolutely Dave Mustaine trying to get songs played on the radio. And first of all, his band name is Megadeth, for God's sakes. Okay. It was never going to happen. He should know. He's the architect of thrash metal. He almost invented it single-handedly.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, thrash metal is a fan-driven thing. Fans don't care about the radio. Okay. And he's always had, I think he's dropped it now, thank God, after, even Super Collider was a bit of an abysmal effort. But he was just obsessed with trying to get things played on the radio. And he was goaded in the media by, of all people, Lars Ulrich, his great nemesis. I remember this. I distinctly remember reading, it was Guitar World or one of the guitar magazines, where Lars and James were being interviewed. And Lars said about Dave Mustaine that he needed to take more risks with his music. And then after Risk was released, Dave Mustaine acknowledged, he said he read that interview and he said, I'll take you up on that one there, Lars. It's like, at this point in time, Dave, if it wasn't for Metallica, you would be the most successful and biggest selling heavy metal or thrash metal band ever.
Yeah.
I think they sell more than Slayer. I could be wrong, but there or thereabouts. Either way, certainly in terms of fan acknowledgement and popularity, they're there or thereabouts. But it's just Metallica are on another level. They're up there with Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all that sort of stuff. They're not really they stopped being a metal band around about Black, didn't they? They became the People's Band, and they did get big radio play after that. But yeah, he's made some bad decisions, Dave, and that's his biggest one.
I gotta say though, the albums he released after United Abominations, I even like Super Collider and the one recent Dystopia. They have good songs on them. I would say he's done a better job of maintaining something of interesting music than Metallica has. Although I do like Hardwired to Self-Destruct from Metallica. But you can't fault Metallica for not trying different things, because Load Reload were way different. Saint Anger, Hate It or Not, was different. Death Magnetic was a phoned-in album, I believe. Hardwire Self-Destruct, I feel like they've tried more to step out of their comfort zone than Megadeth has, but Megadeth has been a little bit more consistent with the quality of music.
Yeah, I think he's overcompensated, Dave, too.
Yeah.
And then he's gone too heavy. Really, I mean, you've mentioned Cryptic Writings already. To me, that's their most complete album. Forget about conversations around their best or what have you. I think that needs to be rust in peace because of the enduring impact that it has. But in terms of personal favorites, ones that I listen to the most, I still listen to Cryptic Writings. And I got that when it first came out, but I just think the blend of melody, pop sensibility, but just heaviness, that thrash execution, it was all there on that album, and I just wish he'd built on it. And he went, after Cryptic, it was Risk, and then the fairly middling The World Needs a Hero, and then he went quite heavy again, didn't he? I can't remember what the name of the comeback. What was the one in 2004 that was almost a solo Mustaine album with the Megadeth moniker?
I
Can't
forgot.
remember his name.
I forgot.
But the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Caliuta on drums, I think it was, and whoever played bass. There was. He's just gone a bit too heavy for my liking, actually, and too fast. And I think that's an overcompensation with Super Collider being the notable exception there. And I just wish he'd sort of. I think it was Dan Huff. Was that the producer on Cryptic Writings? I think it was. He took a bit too much notice of him, and also to Max Norman, who he worked with on Euthanasia, who almost ruined Euthanasia, slowing down the fast songs and quickening up the slow songs to try to get them again played on radio. All this stuff's public domain. People can check out Dave's opinions if you want to deep dive on this stuff. But to me, Dave just should have worried about being Dave, because he's just brilliant. And when he listens to other people and he's goaded into things by Lars or what have you, he just ends up fucking things up.
And is that something he definitely struggled with? But, I'm going to go to an album that had it had mixed reception among fans, but it critically was very well received. And I don't think it's a bad album, but I'm still very disappointed by it. And that's Judas Priest Nostradamus in 2008. First of all, to start with, it's over 102 minutes, 2 discs when it came out. I don't know if you remember that. Holy fuck. Like they went with this whole epic sounding like symphonies and all these songs. For me personally, it was way too experimental. The whole first CD to me was boring. Like, I can maybe acknowledge that there was something interesting, but I felt bored. I can't help but feeling bored throughout that whole album. I like 3 songs from there: Visions, Nostradamus, and Future of Mankind, which are some of the best Judas Priest songs, which makes it even worse because they had the ability to write good music. It's just they chose to go with a direction, obvious choice by them, wanting to do something different, something epic, something, really out there. So much so, every album that they did after that had, because the fans really were very divided on that album. They went back into their traditional Judas Priest formula with Firepower. What was the one after that? After Nostradamus, they released Judas Rising. I think it was probably before that. But they've had good comeback albums, and this one was just, I don't know. When they come to Judas Priest, I don't want to hear Manowar. I don't want to hear Symphony X. That's not the reason I come for them. I want that traditional metal sound. I just want badass, kick-ass songs. I don't need to hear symphonies that are this kind of mellow melodies for 10 minutes. I was just really, really bored with that. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. I believe that's one of the reasons KK Downing, right, and Tripton, they had this kind of dispute of where to take the band, where one of them wanted to really go into this progressive style, where I think it was KK Dowling, or who I forgot who exactly wanted to have a more of a traditional sound to the album.
Yeah, they've shit on KK, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I know KK probably hasn't handled himself as well as he might, as well as I think we as fans might have hoped in the media in the intervening years, because he's been out of the band for over a decade now, I believe. But I'm totally with you about Nostradamus, but I'd even take it back to the comeback, so-called comeback album, Angel of Retribution. That was a piece of shit as far as I was concerned too. Again, plenty of people like their stuff since then, but I'm someone who got into them on Painkiller. So then I went back and didn't get into all of their stuff because it can be a bit boppy poppy, Judas Priest, the 70s shit and all the rest of it. But they have some decent material. There's no doubt about it through the 80s. They're a great heavy metal band that you can listen to in the car. They're fairly inoffensive. You could put them on around a lot of people and they sound a bit like AC/DC at times. But, they never topped Painkiller. It's just an unbeatable album and just the high watermark in their catalogue. But I've got to say, the last good album that I feel that they released is with Ripper, Jugulator. What a brilliant, underrated album.
I love Firepower. The last album was so good.
Yeah, maybe I haven't spent as much time with it as what I need to, but I think by that stage, especially with KK being out of the band, and I love Andy Sneap, by the way. He's fantastic. He's a brilliant guy, but it just feels a bit inauthentic, I've got to say. at this point. It's a bit like the Kiss thing. I get that the fans, the dyed-in-the-wool fans, will be there regardless. A bit like I am for bands like Deicide. I don't care who's in the band. I'm going to listen to Deicide and I'm going to go and watch the tour when it comes out, this sort of thing.
Mhm.
But I just, it's not my jam anymore, brother. And I'm with you there 100% with Nostradamus.
I gotta say though, Judas Priest's old songs sound so good live. That's the way I can listen to them. I'm like you. I got in with Painkiller and started going back into like British Steel and everything like that. And I actually couldn't listen to the original songs in the CDs. Live version of them, I absolutely love because they sound heavier and they
Heavier,
have this
yeah.
quality to them.
Yes, indeed. And I guess for my next one, I've got to go back to a band that we've already spoken about, Metallica. And I, people who listen to our show probably think I pick on Metallica a bit. It's not so much that. It's just that they are the biggest band and they are the most obvious representative of heavy metal in the public sphere. And again, I was there. I was around back in the day when Load was released. And I know how disappointed I was. And I know how much money I didn't have to my name. I think I had like $50 in my bank account. And back then, CDs cost about $33, $35 Australian to buy. So you can imagine I'd lost a bet over a football match. So there was $20 gone. And I think I spent the last little bit, because this is back when parents didn't issue. I was at uni and parents didn't give you money. You just sort of had to scrape by.
Yeah.
I bought Load and I listened to it in the train on the way into uni or back from uni or whatever. And I couldn't believe it. I remember just listening to it thinking, this is just wrong. It was, I understood what they did with Black. We'd all seen the videos by then, the home videos and stuff that they'd made where you had Bob Rock in the studio and you knew what they were trying to reach for there. They were trying to reach for, rock metal perfection, something that could be enduring. Fair play. They can do whatever they want there. But to take it that far, listen, James Hetfield, he's not disowned the albums, but they're far from his favourite. He is on record as saying that the potency of the band was diluted through the Load album series. And if Cliff was around, he would have been a supporter. And what James's opinion was there too. I believe this is Lars's way of just being Lars. I just can't understand it. I mean, let's just talk about the music for a moment across those two albums. It's biker barroom boogie. It's really fucking weird shit. It's like in that era, they had a grunge song in Until It Sleeps, but everything else like Ronnie and the Outlaw Torn and stuff, this is just weird Leonard Skinner sort of Southern rock Allman Brothers shit, weird stuff. It's like they'd been on the road for that long that they were listening to what's that On the Road Again from what's his name? Any other time I'd remember this bloke's name.
No, I don't
everybody
remember.
knows On the Road Again. They covered it on the Garage Inc. album, and they said that they hated him. I'll put it in the comment sections afterwards once we post the video. But anyway, they'd been listening to all of these road songs, the truckers listened to and shit. You could hear it. As they came up with these two albums.
I didn't think it was as bad as you say it. It was bad. I'm gonna say it was bad, but I do like King of Nothing. I even like oh my god, what's that second part to the song they made? Unforgiven 2, Until It Sleeps.
That's okay.
Yeah, it had a couple decent songs. I'm going to refrain to say more about Metallica because you already know I'm going to be talking about Metallica on this list.
Hey, I've just got to say it's Bob Seger. Bob Seger has turned the page,
Seger.
so I just had to Google it then. But yeah, look, I just feel as though it was too much. It was far too much. And I've deep dived into this. I've done a essay or whatever. I put it up on my website, the Scars and Guitars website. But even the live sets from that era are from the first 4 albums. Okay, so up to Justice. Okay, so the well over half of the set list is actually well over half of the set list is drawn from 3 albums, I think, to this day.
Yeah. I have to say I'm surprised you picked. I knew you were going to pick Metallica. You can't talk about disappointment in an album without mentioning Metallica, unfortunately. I'm just surprised you picked Load Reload because there's at least listenable songs there. Because fucking Saint Anger is. I remember going to Virgin Megastore when it was still around on 42nd Street. And my brother is asking me, what would you want me to buy you? And I asked him, can you buy me the new Metallica album? He was already done with that band by that time. I asked him, can you buy me Saint Anger? And when I turned it on, I thought I was listening to a live version, or I couldn't tell what it was with that fucking the sound of like hitting like pots and pans, that production that they had in there. What in the fuck? It was just so off-putting right from the bat. It had two relatively decent riffs and songs, Some Kind of Monster and Invisible Kid, and no solos. It just sounded horrendous throughout. I could not believe that I can listen to a Metallica album I thought Load Reload is as bad as it gets. Okay, they went to a different popular direction. There'll be a couple good songs. I couldn't believe, like, who the fuck released this album? Who allowed this album to be released without production? How did the DVD sound better than the CD did when they were playing live? If you remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're on point, mate. You're on point. The reason why I haven't included it is because it's kind of like having a go at the old man in the corner who's screaming at people who's got something wrong with him. You just got to go, oh, sorry, mate. You must have had a hard life. Something happened to them. To your point, they went crazy. They went absolutely nuts between Sindanga and Lulu. It was fucking strange. It was like they just went, we are going to do our best to destroy our career and piss our fans off.
Yeah.
I mean, Lulu, Sindanga is one thing. But Lulu would have to be one of the most absurdly dumb albums that has ever been released by any band of note. Okay, Lulu makes, I've got to say, again, I just haven't included these two because they're just so far out there that they're far too obvious, okay? Yeah. Risk at least was an album that sounded like some thought had gone into it. Look, Sindanga was like, I remember listening to it as well and going, well, I guess that's their career done, and then that stupid video came out with them complaining about living on their ranches and shit, and, Lars screaming at James about Stark riffs and all this sort of shit, and Dave Mustaine crying and saying that Lee would never understand what he's been through because what Lars did to him. And I'm going, these are some of the richest people on the fucking planet crying and having a dig at this stuff about these are some of the richest and most successful people crying about being successful, apparently, and the trials and tribulations of being successful. That was, again, one thing. But then you hit Lulu with
I didn't even listen to that shit.
Oh my God. Occasionally I put it on just to remind myself how bad it is. Because there's one song where it sounds like as though they've picked a random old geriatric man up off the street, which I think Lou Reed was by that point. And James, I think he's an alcoholic. Am I correct in saying that? James has gotten drunk and said, I'm going to play these songs. I want you to just talk over the top of them. And he's, that song where he's singing Small Town Girl, and Lou Reed's just talking through it. It's like, who thinks this shit is a good idea? Who says there's avant-garde stuff out there that is genuinely interesting? It's really intelligent. Dan Weiss, one of your fellow New Yorkers, great drummer, does a lot of really interesting avant-garde stuff. That's what I'm going to listen to. This is just dumb. It's not musical. It's not artistic. It's not intellectual.
You know what? Also, the problem with Metallica is, unfortunately, this is not something you can particularly put a finger to and say, I hate you for this. It's not under his control, but him throwing his voice out after Black Album, he just didn't have that gruffness in his voice. He sounded like a cowboy almost on Load, Reload. Yes. Both also Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. I think on Hardwire to Self-Destruct, he actually sounds good. It's not as good as he used to, but he sounds better. It's not something you can knock him for, but I didn't like it. It doesn't mean I have to like it. I didn't like his vocals as well. It was just, Death Magnetic was a very phoned in album. It was just people were happy that Metallica didn't suck ass anymore, but at the very least did produce an average album. And then I have to say, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, it did bring me back. I like quite a few of the songs there. It's not a perfect album. It's more of the same from a band I grew up with, so I have a warm place. Me talking shit about this band, and I know you agree, we talk shit about this band, but it still has a special place in our heart. It was part of our childhood. It is part of our forming of heavy metal and what we understand about heavy metal. So they're always going to have a special place in our heart.
Well, listen how passionate we are about them still.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you're right. I listened to Master of Puppets. That was the only album I listened to there for a while. It got me through some pretty tough shit too, to be honest with you. I used to listen to that album and just used to bring me to a better place,
Yeah.
And this was a band that was capable of we talk about genius, but it's genius. You listen to Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. That's a band touched by God.
Yeah,
on those two
great.
albums. They're truly continuously influential. Young fellas, young ladies that continue from Russia to Australia to Great Britain to the United States to parts of Asia to South America, Africa. They're all picking up guitars based on the music and the genius contained on those two albums there. You can't ever overstate how important those two albums are, but then they go and release the stuff that we've spoken about. It's just, it's weird. I don't know. I mean, did Beethoven have a bad symphony? I don't think so. I mean, not that I'm aware of, but Metallica have just, their whole career is built off 2 or 3 albums, and
Yeah.
they can pretty much release them fighting in a bathtub at this point. And some of their fans are going to go, that's so meaningful. I understand that. And I've heard the arguments for Lulu and Zendanga and indeed Load, but sorry, they don't stack up.
Yeah. I get it. I'm gonna leave the next one up to you now.
Yeah, I've got another big band. Yeah, when we're picking on the big bands today, but we've got to, but Iron Maiden. Iron Bloody Maiden.
Oh no.
Where do I start? Iron Maiden is a band that has ultimately been in the downward trajectory as far as albums are concerned since Seventh Son. Okay, that's the last good one. Brave New World has some fine moments, no doubt, and it should have been the dawn of something brilliant. It wasn't, as far as I was concerned. As an old fan, someone who got into the 5 albums, probably between Megadeth and Iron Maiden, Morbid Angel, my favorite bands of all time. But the decision to bring in Blaze needs to be highlighted. Okay, and the 2 albums that they released with Blaze. Okay, so I'm going to focus on them now. I've made a broad opening gambit there, but I'm going to focus on. It was the wrong decision, and I think they threw Blaze to the wolves there, and it all rests on one person's shoulders, and that's Steve Harris. Okay, he's the conductor in that band. Nothing happens in that band without his saying so. Okay, even above and beyond Bruce. Bruce is the public face of the band. Well, they've all got very strong public faces, but he's the spokesperson as far as a lot of fans are concerned. But the Zeus of metal has been and always will be Steve Harris, and his decision to slide into blues prog, because that's what it is, blues prog, and bring in a singer who was more suited to whatever Blaze is doing these days. I've heard it, but I don't know. They were never a good fit, is the best way I could summarize it. Never a good fit. The songs never suited Blaze's voice, and the songs weren't good songs either. Okay, across either of those 2 albums. How on earth Virtual 11 made it past the starting blocks? How on earth people can sit in a studio and finish recording an album and look at each other and go, well done, lads, let's go down to the pub for a pint after Virtual 11. I can't believe that would have happened. Okay, but it did. It did. And Virtual 11, again, I was there when it came out. I got it about a couple of days after it was released. I put it on. I remember just thinking, oh my God, The Angel and the Gambler. What is it? Has like, it sounds like a weird, like, it's like as if it's like a school project. It's done by consent, by committee, an album done by committee. It's like Steve's done his bit, then Dave's done his bit, and then Blaze has come along and done this bit here, and Yannick wants to put this bit here, and it's lacks cohesion. The songs are really bad. The production is flat. Need I go on? I guess it's not Lulu or Sananga. There you go.
My brother is one of those fans that he's a hardcore Iron Maiden fan. He loves every single album from Iron Maiden that they ever put out. Obviously, he has his favorites. I, like you, never got into Blaze Bayley albums, but I also don't like pre-Bruce Dickinson Iron Maiden.
No, I'm the same. Yeah.
Killers, I don't like. For me, Bruce Dickinson is Iron Maiden in many ways. I don't like the Blaze Bayley stuff, but man, Brave New World was a great album. I thought it was fantastic. I thought Book of Souls was good. I thought Senjutsu was great, the one that just came out. I do agree that the band has been on a downfall, but meaning because they've peaked at Seventh Son of Seventh Son. And they're, after peaking and kind of going down the hill, they're going down the hill is better than most bands' albums. I would put it that way. And I don't know if I would say the songs were particularly horrible on the Blaze Bayley albums, but I definitely don't listen to those albums at all. After like the couple times that when they came out, I've really never touched them. So I think I would have to jump in with you and say they were disappointing as well.
They have some listenable moments, like Lord of the Flies. There's another song on that album which is quite good toward the end. It has a Steve Harris harmonic bass solo at the intro that I can never remember the name of. Blood on the World's Hands, I think it is called. The Falling Down song too is not too bad. So that's the X Factor. That had some moments on it, admittedly, that I've listened to over the years, particularly to your point about live, Judas Priest, particularly live, that sounded great.
Yeah.
But Virtual 11 is, oh gosh, yeah, it's they sing the Klansman from that album, and that's never a song that I've truly enjoyed that much. But I get it. Bruce sort of owns that. Bruce owns that song these days. As far as your comments about Brave New World, I agree with you mostly about that one there. I loved it when it came out. I just don't feel that it held up over time, unfortunately. Dance of Death was a complete letdown upon release. It just never held up. I don't feel it was again, it felt like as though they were trying to lean back into the songwriting that happened across X Factor and Virtual 11. 8-minute songs and shit, Passchendaele and all this stuff. And I know these are some of the fans' favorites to this day, but I think it's the old fan in me, the one that listened to Somewhere in Time and I'll stick with Seventh Son. I don't know what happened to them around. Well, I do. They lost Adrian Smith and they conjured up that shit album, No Prayer for the Dying, which it is a shit album. Sorry, I know it's got Bruce on it, but it's not good, man. It's and Fear of the Dark sort of went up a little bit again. It sort of was certainly an improvement, but they released a prog masterpiece, The Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, a heavy metal prog masterpiece. Has all of even the cover looks like it could have been a Yes album, which I know Steve loves. Jethro Tull. It has all of those hallmarks, and it was the genuine, no bullshit heavy metal version of that stuff. And Steve nailed it. The whole band got it right. Adrian's solos are just all time. They're just so good.
This conversation proves one thing: no matter how good you are, nobody stays at the top for a long time. It's like you can't be inspired your whole career. You can't have just successes your whole career. It's like even a band like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica, all these biggest bands in the world. It's just at some point in time, it feels like either I run out of ideas, the hunger's not there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I won't. I've got someone very special to mention next, even though I've spoken to him a bunch of times, so I would never want to offend the man. But I'll let you go next, mate. What's another album that you've got on the shit list, so to speak?
So this is a band that's not as well known. It's the only band here that's not a big band, and it's Warbringer. I discovered Warbringer back in 2007, and I kind of fell in love with it because it was the resurgence of thrash metal that was happening in 2000s, and they released 2 killer albums in a row. I absolutely love what they were doing. The third one I really, really loved, even though the style changed. But after their guitarist, John Lux, left in 2014, he was definitely, you can see, he was the heart of the band. And this album with the singer, John Cavaler, and the guitarist, Adam Carell, they try to kind of come together and make an album, and it just wasn't good. It was very bland. It was very basic. The whole time, the band was very much inspired by Demolition Hammer and these kinds of like sadists and all these like crossover almost or kind of hard punky thrash metal bands. But it just had, to me, no soul, no good songwriting. And me being a big thrash metal guy, and they were the band I leaned on against the most for the resurgence of thrash for me, because they really hit that 80s aggression. Because I have this feeling, I'll explain to you to give you kind of a perspective, is I feel like a lot of bands nowadays are so technically proficient. They're so good now. The level has been raised, the bar has been raised, but a lot of newer bands just do not have that aggression of the 80s, the pure raw energy of the 80s, like Sepultura, like Slayer. They just can't match it for some reason. Maybe they've become too intellectual. I don't know what it is. And Warbringer brought that rawness and unrefined edge to the music that I really, really like about thrash music in general. And then with this album, it was literally the downfall of the band for me. They've created better albums afterwards, and they've regained their kind of songwriting, but it just wasn't the same. And them being my thing I held on to the most, it was very disappointing.
Yeah, I'm with you, mate. As someone who listened to albums like Alice in Hell by Annihilator non-stop, wore it out on a dubbed cassette, I'm with you. I don't know what has happened. I think it is. I don't think it's the band's faults. In fairness, I think it's just in the pursuit of audio perfection, you lose intensity. I think it's inevitable, and that's the trade-off. That must be the trade-off, because I'm hearing it too. I mean, look, I can play. I had them on yesterday. Some band from Sydney that's on Sentient, the label Sentient Ruin, but ultra brutal death metal. But I could listen to it in the car. I could hear everything. It was clear. And I was so inspired to send the band a message and say, mate, lads, great album. I can listen to it in the car. And I was thinking afterwards, yeah, credit to them, great album. But should I really be listening to brutal death metal in the car? I don't think I've really done that before. But I could put it on and it stayed on, and I noticed that. And I've got my car's a 2000. One of our cars is a 2008 Land Cruiser, so it relies on a Bluetooth speaker. So the things you plug into your cigarette lighter and it frequency bounces off that from your phone. So it's going through about 3 or 4 points before the audio quality diminishes, is my point there. But it still stood up. And this is a brutal death metal band. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that one there 100%. But a bloke who I've spoken to a bunch of times, and one of my favorite heavy metal musicians ever, is Max Cavalera. Okay.
Yes.
And no, I'm not going to single out one album from him and say that it's a bad album, whatever, has been a disappointment, but I'll simply say, as a broad brush statement, that I think he focuses on putting out too much content.
I agree.
Okay? And he focuses too much on collaborations. Whereas when Max is just Max, he's brilliant. Some of the greatest riffs ever written are by the Cavalera, by Max, and so some of the best thrash crossover death albums are by Sepultura. Soulfly, I just don't think any of the stuff has been as memorable. Okay, and I think it's inevitable, like you've so eloquently said, mate. Bands peak, and Sepultura peaked around 90, 91 or thereabouts, and what a glorious peak. But the fact remains, mate, we as fans, we sort of hang with bated breath on every release from a favourite artist such as Max, who's a tremendous fella, by the way. Love having a chat to him. I've had 5 or 6 conversations with him, met him in person. Can tell you he's a genuine human being, Max. It's just, I wish he'd sort of bring it back down a little bit and maybe only release sort of one album every 2 years or thereabouts, and just sort of put the focus on refining the quality there and just the best riffs rather than all of the riffs.
I thought about including Max Cavalera in this conversation as well. I actually like Prophecy from Soulfly. That might be and the Cavalera Conspiracy, the first album, I thought wasn't bad. But I agree with you. He's just too busy. And I think it's because he's genuinely enjoying doing these things and wanting to produce music. But I feel like with rock in general, rock and heavy metal, you need to let it marinate a little bit longer, because you need to create a product that's going to stand, many years of time. It's not pop music that an album is released. Oh, it sucked. I can release a new album like a year later and people will forget this one. That doesn't happen in heavy metal, because most metal artists have a discography of 10 albums, perhaps, right? And that's about where they stop. They don't have extremely long discographies. So each one has to be the best that you create. You're not buying beats. You're not buying music from somewhere else. You are the guy who creates all the music. So I think I 100% agree. He needs to sit down a little bit. He needs to give it time. He needs to let it marinate. And I think he still has it in him to produce good music. It's just at the pace he's doing it, I don't think it's going to happen.
He's never let me down. I've got to say, it's just the albums are of varying quality. And I can hear when he's labouring over a riff for a bit too long. And I don't like a lot of the collaborators he brings on. It could give or take most of them, the hip hop collaborations and stuff, and the people that he brings onto these Soulfly albums, and just Max be you. He's so creative that his children have spoken to his son Igor, so obviously his namesake is his uncle, about his band Go Ahead and Die that Max is also in as well. And that's a great band. Yeah, it's a great band. This is the thing. Max is spreading himself everywhere. And he's just got this fervent creativity that he's spreading everywhere. Max, one album every 2 years would be perfect from you. That's, if he ever listens to this, that's what I'd say.
You know what it is too? A lot of people credit the end of Sepultura and the beginning of Soulfly as the thing that really pushed a lot of bands into this new metal genre. to create this kind of more hip hop, more this different sound that he's basically credited by a lot of people for creating that. And you know me, I'm not a big fan of that myself. But I'm going to switch to my last one here. And this one hurts the most because this is my favorite band of all time. And that's Iced Earth. And I'm going to talk about not particularly, and I was trying to pick one album, but it's really Iced Earth post horror show. After horror show, that band is just not the same. It's after Matt has left the first time he left because he went to pursue a career being a police officer. The songs on Framing Armageddon, the Glorious Burden, and everything they've really produced after that point just doesn't have really good songwriting. And you can tell that John Schaefer is trying so hard to recapture the magic of old Iced Earth, and it's just not sticking. So much so, first he gets rid of Tim Ripper Owens, which wasn't bad. It's just the music needed to be better for him to really shine through. I believe so. Then he brings in Stu Block from Into Eternity, I think was the name of the band. And he's basically, you can tell he's directing him to sing exactly like Matt Barlow. Why? You brought a different vocalist. Let him shine. Let him bring his own thing to the band. It's just like John Schaefer was too controlling of the band. And then him going off the deep end with Sons of Liberty and all his fucking crazy right-wing conspiracies that he was having, like just like completely like off the board. Like he watched, like my friend and I would say it felt like he discovered Wikipedia and just watched every possible conspiracy theory on Wikipedia and blurred it out in his music. It's like, what the fuck, bro? We don't care. Just make some good power metal. That's all I want. And unfortunately, the band has never recovered. I don't think they will. I just know I have these albums, 5 or 6 albums before Horror Show and Horror Show included, that I will enjoy. But it's a band that fell so hard and will never recover.
You're right. John is a brilliant musician, but he's also a fool, a complete fool. He's ideologically driven and motivated. People know him and love him because of the music. They don't give a shit about Sons of Liberty or whatever it might be called and his ideological position on these sorts of things. Look, you can have an opinion. It's not about that. God knows I share enough of my opinion on my own podcast with musicians I'm talking to. We always do. But it is about the music. Okay, so keep it about the music. Share your political opinion and the like. But there is a fine line, but there's absolutely a line. Okay, and I know, as I say, I know that because I'm hosting a podcast and talking about a lot of these issues too. There are some issues worth talking about, but it is never at the expense of the music, and that is the point. And that's what John forgot. No idea what happened to him, or but he's part of the Oath Keepers and all these weird groups. And when you start diving into that stuff, I think you've got to remain as. What I'll say about the political stuff, we talk about it a lot off camera. You have to work hard to remain centrist. Okay? I spoke about that with young people when I was at uni. Okay, you have to work hard to see both perspectives. Okay, you do, but a lot of people like John from the left, mainly on the left, I've got to say, but also on the right, they jump into these ideological positions, and you can almost pick what all of their positions are going to be on certain things. And with John, it was pretty clear to see what his position was based on where he was during the Capitol Hill riots. And
when I remember clearly being at a concert for Iced Earth, and the opening band was Sons of Liberty, his other side project. And we're, my friend and I don't know who they are. We're like, oh, this is going to be cool. Let's check them out. Every single song ends, he gives a 5-minute speech about some ideological bullshit he's going to bring up again. And halfway through the concert, literally people are going, John, we love you, but shut the fuck up and play another song. And he's heard it many times. Like, I know you guys, you think I'm crazy. We're like, shut the fuck up. We don't care.
You are slightly crazy. Yeah.
I couldn't wait for that concert to be over until Iced Earth came out and they played, and then I was happy again. But man, it's just, I don't care. We talked about this also off camera. I am too busy to be really concerned with every little thing that's happening in the world. I go for music for release, for escapism as well. Of course, you can talk about serious elements, serious things, but you're a power metal fantasy band. Yep. Dude, come on.
Ditch the indoctrination. Because nobody really cares ultimately. We've all got regular, like people like us, regular people who've got jobs and families and marriages and paying taxes and potentially mortgages, certainly rents, this sort of stuff. I mean, how much energy have we got to devote to try to understand what the hell somebody's rambling about?
Yeah.
That goes for everything. Even Rage Against the Machine, it's the same shit. It's just, for God's sakes, do you think people are into you because of your political stance about the Zapacitas or down in Mexico, or is
Exactly.
it because you got killer riffs? It's because you got killer riffs, and I think Tom Morello understands that. I know I'll give Tom Morello a lot of credit on that. I mean, I still think he's managed it. He's the one guy I think has got a good blend of both. I don't even agree with his socialist perspective whatsoever, but he puts it across in a way that doesn't kill the music for a fan like me.
Yeah.
You know, so should we bring it home? Is there any? I just want to mention two albums that people might be wondering why me in particular, I haven't brought up. Celtic Frost's Cold Lake from 1988. The album photos, the photos that accompany that album are the only thing that are truly offensive. The album was poorly mixed, but it has some absolutely classic and banger riffs on there. It doesn't really fit into the rest of the Celtic Frost catalogue, but it's a personal favourite. I'll never include that on any great disappointment list because I still love the album. And I certainly was too young to get into it when it came out, but I got into it soon after, and I listened to it for years and years and years. It was gym music, listened to it in the car. It was as important to me as what Master of Puppets was. So that's why it didn't make my list, and it never will, even though it seems to make everybody else's bloody list, even though I doubt most people have never listened to it. And the other one, the other big kahuna of stinkers, apparently, is Morbid Angel's Elude Divinum Insanus. I understand the hate for that album on a couple of levels because there are some ridiculous songs on there, and the production varies because he's gone Gabba and he's put Gabba Techno Trey, he's put Gabba Techno on there and some other pretty weird stuff. David's got some pretty bizarre lyrics that have been mistaken for. He says "Killer Colt" in one bit, but it sounds like he's saying "Killer Cop." And people saying don't quote body count, dude. You know. But again, it's an album. The guitar, I'm a big Trey guitar fan, and the guitar tone is menacing all the way across that for the most part. So it's got some brutal death metal cuts on it. So that's why those two albums didn't make my list. I just thought I'd put that out there in case people started. Well, we want people to comment, but just in case people were wondering why I didn't, in the comments section, they're saying, why didn't you mention those two albums? They suck. Well, now you know. I like them.
I don't have anything else to really. I had a hard time coming up with a big list because I am quite positive, even if I don't like something, okay, it's not for me. But for me to say something is absolute horseshit, it has to be bad. It has to be really, really bad. And so I couldn't come up with a lot. So my list is really the list where I can tell you where I'm most disappointed in. But for the most part, I can digest anything, even if it's mediocre. Because if I just have a passion and a love for a band, for example, Artillery is a band I grew up with, an 80s thrash kind of band.
Sure.
And they keep releasing albums and they're mediocre. But there's, you know what? I can still listen to them because I love Artillery and who they are. And I don't mind supporting a band that might not be the top tier band, but I think they still deserve some respect. But just like you mentioned, I actually want to open up the floor to people as well. Is if you have particular albums that you were really, really disappointed with and why you were disappointed. Hopefully you can give us some other examples than the ones we've mentioned. And just overall, your feeling around the metal, even bands, we'll expand to bands that kind of over time, do bands peak? Is it every single band that eventually drops off the face of the earth, unfortunately? And we'll leave it up to that for people. Andrew, you have anything else that you would like to add for the conversation?
No, just to support your comments there. Tell us which albums you think suck. If you disagree with us, if you find, especially about St. Anger and Lulu, if you find something positive about it, let us know. I want to understand if there are any redeeming characteristics across those two albums. Risk Don't Bother, I've checked out of that album years ago, despite many attempts to try to understand it. But St. Anger and Lulu in particular, if there's a way that people can understand that album, and don't fan out and go, Metallica are the best, man, and fuck you, or whatever. If you're going to do that, forget about it. Okay. But if you genuinely have a take on these albums and you disagree with us, share it. Okay. Because it might be the way that we can start enjoying them.
Exactly. And guys, make sure to enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe out there and keep it metal.
Good. Thanks, bro.